Lisa and I met many years ago. We were babies at the
So young.
time. Lisa, being the travel extraordinaire woman, writer, and I worked in PR for tourism. So one of the many things I did was to organize trips for writers to come and visit California was one of my clients. So we used to invite travel writers to different places in California so that they would write about California and encourage people to come here, travel here, spend their money here.
That's so cool.
All that kind of stuff. So that was my job, and that's how I met Lisa. I'll tell you a little bit about Lisa. She is an amazing person, by the way. I'll just
Thank
put
you.
that. It doesn't say that on her bio, but
My bio doesn't say that. You can ad lib.
She's incredible. She's an award-winning travel expert who's explored 102 countries on 6 continents. That's
So
updated. Yes,
jealous.
yes. She went to the University of Pennsylvania, graduated there, and sailed across the seas for 7 years with Princess Cruises, Royal Caribbean, and Renaissance Cruises, and spent 3 years backpacking across Asia. I'll tell you a little bit about
3 years.
her experiences. She has written for many, many publications, AARP, their magazine, AAA Explorer, Wired, and she has her own site called We Said Go Travel, where she blogs and talks about her travels. Her award-nominated global podcast, Make Your Own Map. She has interviewed Deepak Chopra, Olympic medalists, and numerous best-selling authors. And as a journalist, has been invited to both the Oscars and the United Nations. We don't like the United Nations right
We
now.
don't like them.
But-
We didn't.
Whatever.
It just sounds pretty bitchin'.
It sounds good.
Yeah, on paper it's fantastic.
No. I went for Ms. Magazine, and I went with. I mean, even at the time, I mean, the United Nations had never been a friend of Israel.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes if you don't show up, you can't help make a difference.
Well, that's the difference. You have to be there and you have to show up even if they're not a friend.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
That's why I went.
Good answer.
Yes.
But
That's what I was gonna say.
in particular today, with the news of today of the vote, was maybe take that off my bio for today.
I was like, oh, United Nations.
I agree.
For her print and digital stories, as well as her television segments, she has been awarded 3 Southern California Journalism Awards and 2 National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Awards, and been a finalist 22 times.
Wow.
Pretty amazing. Named a number 3 travel influencer in 2023. Niver talks travel on broadcast television at KTLA, Los Angeles. She has a YouTube channel with over 2 million views, and in her memoir, which we're here to listen about today, Bravish, 1 breakup, 6 continents, and feeling fearless after 50. Her book has won too many awards to mention, honestly. And it seems like every day I get a ping like, she won another award for her book. I mean, it's pretty spectacular.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It really is. All of the wonderful awards
Thank you.
and accolades for this book. And today is the 1-year anniversary of Bravish.
Thank you.
Anymore.
Thank you.
Still going strong after 1 year.
Thank you. That was very special. So last year, my book came out in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So it felt such an auspicious time. So this year with the leap month, it's different.
Yeah.
It's significantly different, but it's very exciting.
But the month of Elul is
The month of Elul is-
to uplift, so
Yeah.
it's a transcendent month. So
It really it
is.
is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would just like to add that the book, I mean, yes, it's about her travels and her experience, but really it's an inspirational book about her story and how all the traveling came to be and how important the experiences and adventures along the way has made her who she is today. And she's super inspirational to me. And I'm looking forward to hearing more
Thank
about
you.
your story.
That's such a nice introduction. Thank you. Thank you. I love
So
it.
glad that you're here.
Thank you. Well, I love that we're such an intimate group. So I am a teacher by training, so feel free to interrupt me. That makes me feel more at home. But I also had this new idea. I haven't done this at any of my events before. I made a Bravish bingo. All the cards are different. I don't exactly have the greatest plan about them, but I brought you markers. You can have more than one card, I thought, because maybe you need one card.
More than one? Or?
I'm not sure, but maybe you need one card that's like
It's going to be a little too much.
too much. Okay, like maybe you need two colors then. Like things that you already feel you are, things that you want to be, or they don't all have the exact same words, but they have this similar feeling. So I had one idea if you would, I'm not sure. It's evolving. This is my new idea.
I love it.
Yeah, because when I worked on a cruise ship, I called a lot of bingo. But
What were you doing on the cruise ship? Were you like the
Cruise director, Julie?
Yeah.
yes, in the beginning, when I first worked on ships, I worked in the kids program because I'm a teacher by training. Actually, in the state of California, I have 5 licenses for teaching. I also work for Nickelodeon and Paramount on set. I teach there also. But
That's what you were doing when I met you.
it
When
is?
I first met you.
Okay.
You were doing that.
So I've done a lot of different things with teaching, but so when I first started on Club Med and the cruise ships, I was a teacher. And then I was telling you guys a little earlier that I moved from Club Med to cruise ship. So my first job was in the kids program. And then what happened was I met everybody else. And the cruise staff, they made more money. They worked less hours and they had better cabins. So I was like, I will have that. Please. And then the other thing that happened was there's not a reward in the many businesses, but in cruise ships particularly, for being loyal. So my friend that is still out at sea, literally could be almost 30 years now, has mostly worked for the same company. I worked for Princess, then I worked for Royal Caribbean, then I worked for Princess, then I worked for Renaissance, then I worked for Princess. And every time I came back, she was still there. I made a lot more money than her. And I had better itineraries. So I was saying earlier, we were talking about that I was at sea 7 years. I kept trying to quit. They're like, this has been really, really great. That is it. I am not coming back. I'm like, well, Lisa, have you been to Asia yet? I was like, okay, one more contract. That's it. And now I'm really quitting. And they're like, well, we don't think that you've been, from Buenos Aires to Santiago yet, have you? And I'm like, okay, that's the last one though. And then I was working for Renaissance Cruises, and I was in New York on September 11th, and within 6 days, Renaissance Cruises was bankrupt. So that was sort of the end of that phase. And then I went back to teaching. I always go back to teaching. And then I taught, and then that's when I started backpacking. I met someone, and we traveled together. And later that was the man I married, and that's the not very pleasant beginning of my book, is when my marriage fell apart. But I tell people, you don't get a traditionally published book if you have a not that bad story. They don't care. So anyway, so that one's not mine. Which one has mine? This one. So my publisher always tells me I should actually read from the book. So I thought that I would read a little bit. I've done a lot of events. Like you were saying, the book is out today, 1 full year. So that's why I thought we could toast with brownies later. But even though I've had events, I spoke at a women's conference in Mexico, and I spoke in the travel show across the United States. I don't really talk that much about the Jewish parts of my book, but there's a lot of Jewish things in my book, because I do really feel that wanting to be back at synagogue and wanting to be back at Shabbat really saved me when things were so bad in my marriage and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I came back to Los Angeles. I met with my rabbi, and I thought he probably had spoken to a lot of people that had troubles in their relationship. And I think that's this first part I have here. Yeah. So I said, I went to see Rabbi Eli Hersher at Stephen Wise Temple, the same temple where I celebrated my bat mitzvah and got married many years earlier. I knew I needed help to figure out my next steps, and he had been counseling people in troubled marriages for decades. I had missed participating in my Jewish community while I was traveling and had been going to Shabbat services every Friday, even though I cried through many of them. Rabbi Hersher told me numerous things over the course of many meetings, but two of his insights really struck me. First of all, he said, in a Jewish wedding, we do not say, till death do us part. Because earlier in the book, I talked about talking with a friend of mine that I was a bad wife and I was a failure and getting divorced was a drama. And one of the things that she said to me was, you're not supposed to stay until they kill you. Till death do us part isn't supposed to be a death sentence. And so Rabbi Hersher said, we don't even say that. So he was like, well, let's put that out of the way. And then Rabbi Hersher told me the second thing was, we do not even push strangers in the street. And so that was a big issue because the last day I ever saw my husband, that's what happened. He pushed me down in the street. And fortunately for me, the only thing that broke was my heart, because I certainly over the next days was very worried, like my parents were going to have to come collect me, possibly dead or broken, from the hospital. So that was a big issue, speaking with him about what to do and how to participate and what does it mean to be in community and in relationship. So I do spend a lot of time at Stephen Wise, and in fact now I'm even on the board at Temple. But I think, did this have another part of, so there's another part in the book where we were talking about how things happen in situation that, is it a sign? And so I was complaining that I wanted to get rid of, my husband and I at the time had a joint credit card, and I wanted to cancel it because he was still traveling and I came back alone. And he was spending money on our joint credit card and I was paying it. And I was like, so I said to the lawyer, I want to cancel the credit card. And she told me, you can't cancel the credit card. It has his insurance on it. And that would leave him in a bad situation. I'm like, who cares about his bad situation? She says, well, they can't do that. So the next day I got a phone call from my credit card company. There was fraud on my credit card. And they were going, in fact, to have to cancel my credit card. So I felt like the universe, that story reminds me of this week's pager stories. Sometimes things just work out, that you get to take care of things. Another funny, I think all of us know people who've gotten divorced and fought over ridiculous things. So in my relationship, we had put all of our photos at the time on Shutterfly. We don't do that anymore now because the iPhone has 2 terabytes of storage. But at the time, that was how we stored digital photos. So my spouse wanted copies of everything. And so we were fighting over how to make a second account on Shutterfly. I spent thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars fighting over digital photos. So I just think it's always so interesting what we fight about and what seems important at the time. So my favorite universe story is I had to order all the photos from Shutterfly on CD-ROM disc. And I assumed they would come, each CD-ROM would have one album from Shutterfly. Because if I were in charge, that's what I would do. Right, they'd be organized. Like, here's the photos from Thailand, here's the photos from Indonesia. So I have to say, it was one of my favorite moments in life when I opened up the package from Shutterfly and all the discs fell out blank. I have no idea if they had photos on them or not. I never checked. But it didn't say like 2012, 2013, right? You would organize it like this.
They didn't label it.
There was no labels. And I have no idea if like if it was, each one was.
You gave it to him here, back here?
I haven't seen him since that day. But it was February 2014. I never saw him again. But he never came back. He's still, I don't know. But, well, I do know because after my book came out, one of the most unusual messages I got, people message me all the time about my book. But I got a message, and in the book, my ex is named Fred. And I got a message on Instagram, and the woman said, you don't know me, but on social media, you were recommended me as someone that I probably knew. She said, I dated Fred after you. And she said, I heard all the stories you tell in the book, but they sounded a little bit different. It sounded a little bit different. And she said, I really felt so terribly alone and so dumb for being involved with him, but I read your book and I feel much better now. And I just wanted to message you. And I was like, wow. I said, I'm kind of freaking out now, but I appreciate you reaching out. So it's funny how we can be connected through social media. And but yeah, that Shutterfly story is one of my favorite things. Is in all of them backwards. But let's see. Oh, I had so the other thing that happened with the rabbi was we were talking about it. Obviously, you had an attorney, and at the time you said I have a website. We said Go Travel, which we created together, which meant I did all the work and he took a lot of the credit. And my attorney said, "Where's the paperwork?" I said, "What paperwork?" She said, "Well, how do you pay the taxes?" I said, "I call the the accountant." She said, "Well, what about an attorney?" I'm like, "There's no attorney." I said, "But if you want me to get one, I'll get one right now." She goes, "I don't want you to do anything until the divorce is final. If you don't have any paperwork, that's okay." But so there were a lot of things that were pieces missing. And one of the things that comes up in the book is my whole life I was told I was very clumsy and I had a lot of accidents. So in my book, after my divorce, I did 50 challenges before I turned 50 to restart my life after my divorce. And so one of the things that came out is I'm not clumsy. I had an undiagnosed eye condition. So my whole life, it was acceptable in the 70s for girls not to be that athletic. And, there was no AYSO for all the girls. And so they were just, she's smart. She likes to read. She's just real clumsy. And in fact, I'm not clumsy at all, but I did not see properly. And so one of the things that we discovered when I finally got diagnosed, and I went through a lot of vision therapy with amazing Dr. Brodney in Santa Monica. Dr. Brodney talked to me about that I always worked harder than other people. And one of the things I tried really hard to do was make things work because he said my whole life was like I was running up the down escalator. I didn't know I was working harder. And one of the things that's true about children with eye issues is they can't explain how they see, and it seems normal. So kids with double vision sometimes are diagnosed with autism because they don't make eye contact, but that's because they don't know which one of the two is right. And during the PR for my book over the last year, I've met with a few people who've taken their daughter, who they thought was very clumsy, to the eye doctor, and it turns out they're not clumsy, they don't see right either. And so one of the other issues that comes up is the kids that don't do well on ADHD medication, that's because they don't have ADHD. They have an undiagnosed eye problem. And so they're difficult in class or they can't fix their work because they literally can't see. So I used to have a thing, my dad, we say, would rather ski than breathe. And so I grew up skiing and sometimes I was fine. And then the light would shift and I fake a lot of stuff, or I did. And so I would sit on the side of the run and cry and he would ski me down. And no one ever seemed to figure out that it was inconsistent. Right? It wasn't that I was always a bad skier. I was occasionally a bad skier. So I now do a lot of work. I do a lot of stories with the National Ability Center in Utah. And I was fascinated growing up. People used to ski, the pennies would say blind skier. And I was always mesmerized. And finally, as an adult and as a journalist, I've been skiing with them. I've skied with a blind skier. I've skied with wounded warriors. And I spoke with one of the physicians that's part of the group. And I said, at the time I was pretty bitter that no one had ever helped me. Why didn't anybody help me? Why didn't anybody diagnose me? He said, in a way, it might have been better for you because you might have just kind of sat back in it and been like, I can't do it. He said, you didn't know you couldn't do it. And somehow you did so much. But that was when I first got my actual testing. I called Dr. Brodney. I said, Dr. Brodney, I can't really make sense of these scores. I said, is 0 a good score? He said, no, Lisa. At the time, I already had my master's in education. Lisa, how every test you've ever taken your whole life, 100 is a good score? I said, yes.
Hasn't changed.
I said, I just thought maybe this was different because my scores are so low. I have like a 3 and a 7% and a 17%. And it just doesn't really make sense that 100 could be good. He said, no, when I see scores like yours, I'm just happy you can read. And I said, does that mean I could have taken the little bus to school? He's like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. He said, we don't want to focus on that. But so there were a lot of things that came together that are themes in my book. There was a lot of issues with my eyes, a lot of falling down, and obviously a lot of crying, but also a lot of being Jewish. So one of the things that Rabbi Hersher said to me at the time that I was getting divorced, he was about to retire. And we talked about that I could get a civil divorce, a regular divorce, and then get a Jewish divorce. And because my spouse was not physically present on the same continent, it actually was one thing that made getting a get very simple because we couldn't appear together. So I didn't appear, but I got my get. And then my favorite part was I got to have a mikveh ceremony to start another chapter. So the 50th challenge in my book, I actually went skydiving. And then I had the mikveh ceremony, which was, I write a lot about in my book. And one of my favorite things about skydiving was because my whole life I thought I was clumsy and not very brave. I just thought some people were brave, not me, and other people were brave, like my skydiving instructor. He's obviously brave. So when I went skydiving in La Jolla. And when I got there, if you have been skydiving, anybody? So you might not be aware that if you show up to go skydiving and it's cloudy, you don't go. You have to wait. So they said, we're just going to wait and see what happens. So we waited for a full 2 hours. So that meant I had 120 minutes to think about my choices. And mostly I was thinking I'd like to go. So for me, I did a tandem. So the person that I was going to be attached to was trying to keep me from leaving. So he was talking to me about my project. And I had just prior to that been in Mexico to go scuba diving with the bull sharks. And the man says to me, oh, I would never do that. I'm like, you would never do what? I would never go in the ocean with sharks. I'm afraid of sharks. I'm like, you throw yourself out of a plane for money. He said, yeah, I really, really love skydiving, but I am very afraid of sharks. And so that was the first time I really thought about that we have this funny feeling in our heads about what it means to be who we are compared to what other people are willing to do. And he was afraid of sharks. And it's possible that the very first time I went scuba diving, for sure I was afraid of everything, but the first time I saw a shark, I was very afraid. But I've been diving so much all around the world, and I even went, this thing that he and I were discussing, I went to shark school. And at shark school, we were scuba diving in Mexico with the bull sharks, which are known to be one of the top most dangerous sharks. If they're the male sharks and if they're hungry, but we were actually with pregnant female sharks, and it's a totally different situation and very safe. Well, okay, not very safe, but whatever. Highly trained. They're still sharks. They're still sharks, highly trained. And we weren't out to get them, and they knew it. So it was just a really important moment for me of thinking about that it's not, hello, come in. That it's not one way or the other. I thought about bravery as a light switch, that it's on or off, that we can really find our way through. And so that was one of the things that being, some of the things about temple and some of the things about my rabbi, one of the things we were talking about the mikveh ceremony, he said to me that his nephew had told him, you don't have to know everything you're going to do next. You're not writing the whole book. You're simply turning a page to begin the next chapter. I was moving in a new direction, but I didn't necessarily need to know what lay ahead. And then for my mikvah, I said, several friends joined me for the ceremony as witnesses, and being in the sacred space and waiting in the water reminded me that I was blessed, that I belonged, and that I could forgive myself. So I think that is, I already told this part. I know the story, so sometimes tell it out of order. But one of the things that I love, I know we talked about that this month is so important for Elul, but in the book I was reading Rabbi Karen Kadar when it was the Counting the Omer, And at the time, she was sending out these daily emails. And so I was able to include a couple of excerpts. And, you know, it's funny to me, the whole process of writing the book, that, you know, it's such a process to I did the 50 things. In fact, I actually did 80 things, but I did 50 things, and then we picked them and writing about what did I do, and making the arc of like following the changes of my eyes and being Jewish. But it's so interesting that you think it's hard to know where the success is, right? Like, did you make it? Like, if I wrote the book and no one ever read it, it still would have been worth it for me because it was so cathartic. I honestly would write sections of the book, and I would basically sit at my desk and write until I was pretty sure I was going to throw up, and then I would lie on the floor. And then I would call one of my friends who's a therapist, and I was like, this is the worst idea I ever had. I quit. And I would rant and rave on her answering machine, her voicemail, whatever. And she finally admitted after several weeks that this was going on, that she wasn't listening to any of my messages. She's like, they're all the same. I know how you are. You're like, I'm going to quit. I hate this project. I'm not doing it. And she said, and then the next day you wake up and you would start again. And it was so interesting. So it was such a big ordeal. You know, you finally get an agent, then you finally get a publisher, and then you finally finish the book. And I remember we had a call about all these quotes. I have this Rabbi Karen Kadar, and I have the Debbie Friedman's Misha Berach. And so we're having a call with the publisher. We'll talking about permissions. You have to have permission to use someone else's work. I'm like, that makes sense to me. I'm like, I was so excited. I'm like, now I have a team. I have an agent. I have a publisher. I have an editor. I'm like, yeah, you guys go do that. And they're like, no, you go do that. And so I call my best friend. And I'm like, how do I have all of these people? And I'm still the intern. I'm still the intern. So I called my agent. I have a lovely agent, Chip. I never thought this book would be championed by a man agent, but he was the one that signed with me, and it really spoke to him. And so I have Chip, and I called Chip, and I was like, what do you mean I have to get the permissions? He said, Lisa, this is why I tell debut authors not to use other people's work. Don't use quotes from other people. And I was like, oh, Chip, I really like my quotes. I need them. He said, okay, well, then you have to get the permissions. I said, okay, well, so where do I get the form? He goes, what form? I said, well, I'm not the first author ever to need a permission. What do other people do? There's no form. I was like, okay, that's so weird. I'm like, how do I get the phone numbers? Like, who do I call? He goes, yeah, get on that. Awesome. So I called my editor, and she's like, that's why we don't think you should use a lot of quotes. I'm like, this is the weirdest business. Like, books are so broken. Like, it's some bigger, Post Hill Press is a lovely publisher, and my book was represented from Post Hill Press, distributed by Simon & Schuster. But there's a lot of things that you would be surprised you still have to do. So it's been quite a journey. And I've learned a lot, and I'm so excited and honored. And we're a small group, so I would love to take your questions. And we could read more, or we could ask questions, or we could talk more about specific travel places. I know you have Africa questions.
I have a question. So after going through this whole process of it's obviously painful. A painful process to write it all down and relive it all and all of that. Would you do it again?
Would I write another book? It has come up quite a bit. When you introduced me, you were talking about the book has won a lot of awards. I've won awards as a journalist. My podcast has won awards. So one of the things that's come up with my publisher and my agent is that I have won more awards and have more events and been on TV more than most of any of their other authors of any level, debut or more famous, because I kept going. So we have been joking that my next book's called Relentless, but in a good way. That because there's nothing in this book about the journey of getting an agent or getting published, and I think that is of interest to a lot of people. So would I do it again? yes, but not yet. I before COVID, I was doing a lot of TV segments on travel for KTLA, and then during COVID, I wasn't traveling. My mom has some immune issues, and I wasn't traveling. But I'm leaving soon, next week, to go film in Ireland. So I'm very excited to be back on the road and talking travel. And I would write another book. I hope it's not going to be quite as traumatic the next
Right.
book. I'm hoping that's in my past.
Light.
It doesn't have to be light, but I'd like to not be like falling down crying from the experience. But again, like, yeah, I mean, I do truly mean that. Writing the book was very hard. And I did have an excellent editor, a developmental editor. Of some people say to me they want to write a book, but they can't write a book. But the thing is, for the most part, no one writes a book alone. You either have, like, I had a developmental editor, so my editor was Anne. Anne and I spent a lot of time on the phone. I wrote out a lot of stuff, and she helped with the outline. This book started over multiple times. I had a first version of the book that I took out to agents was just the 50 things. And the agent said, it's not a book. If you write a book, every woman should do these 50 things before she's 50. That's a book. This book is your 50 things, so that no one will read these 50 things unless they care about you. So they said, at the agents I met with the first round, I'm like, you must talk about your divorce. And I was like, project's over. Off the table. And so that I carried that around for a while. And somehow, I'm not exactly sure why. I really never wanted to do it. I felt pretty called, though, that it was important to tell the story. I had the ability to write it. I had the support from my family to be a journalist and a writer, which is challenging. Sometimes getting worse depending on who you ask. Troubled journalism times, but I would love to do a different kind of project that maybe didn't feel like, pouring my blood in every chapter. Like something about, I've been fortunate to write for Ms. Magazine a bunch and tell interesting stories, so I would love to do more of that. But I'm not saying no, but I'm not like yes. I'm not thinking like, oh my gosh, writing a book's so fun. Like scuba diving, so fun.
Right.
Writing a book, I appreciate that the effort's worth it, but it's not like chocolate cake every day. Yes.
So I've been to 18 countries.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And 13 of them have been since I turned 50. I'm now 54. And my favorite place in the whole world was the most random odd trip. We went to Isle of Man. And
we
didn't know why we were going. And we kept saying, it was 4 of us, why are we going to Isle of Man? And my friend kept saying, who the hell wouldn't want to go to an isle full of men? So that's why we went. And I got to tell you, it was the most magical, fabulous place. I'll talk to you about it if you want.
I would love that.
Where is your, and I've been to Israel and I've been to Africa. I've been to all these, I'm very lucky. I've been to all these places, but where's your favorite place that you've traveled?
That's a good question. First of all, I've never been to the Isle of Man, so I want to go there. I one of the things that is a surprise to people is that I still have so much on my bucket list. I always want to go more places. And the other thing, kind of like what you're describing exactly, is I was in the southern islands of Thailand, and we went to this festival. And when we got there, it was some effort to get to this place. We got there, and everyone's like, "Oh, what about did you go on the boat ride to all these other islands?" I was like, "There's more islands."
But isn't that it? Like the more you do, the more you know, and the more that's out there.
1,000,000% I agree with you. The more you do, the more you know. But it's fascinating. People that don't really have quite as much wanderlust or haven't been exposed as much think like, I went to Bali. And they spend a week in Bali and like, I have done Indonesia. So Indonesia is the largest archipelago on the planet. I've been to Sumbawa. I've been to Flores. I've been to I can't think of the names right now of the Gili Islands. A lot of Americans don't seem to understand that Bali is not all of Indonesia. It's certainly a beautiful, wonderful place to go. I love it there, but there's many places, and each place has a slightly, some of them have different religions, some of them have different cultures, some of them have Komodo dragons. That was amazing. My favorite place, I generally say Mongolia. I had done an 11-month trip. That during that trip, I came home engaged, which at the time seemed exciting. Doesn't seem quite as exciting anymore. But you know how that ended. So at the time, I didn't know how it was going to end. But the last country we went to on that 11-month journey was Mongolia. We were in China. And I really, really did not want to go to Mongolia. Not for any reason of Mongolia. I just was tired. And it ended up just being, literally, we got to Ulaanbaatar and we were booking this van trip into the desert. And they said, you'll get in the van and you will go to the vast expanse of nothingness. And I, apparently it wasn't a good question. I said, how will I know when I get there? And they're like, maybe you shouldn't go. But we were beyond the power lines, and we did hire a translator. It was maybe a problem that we didn't ask the question of what language did she translate between. Because she was excellent with Russian and Mongolian. She was not so good in English. But we had the driver, and we had her, and it was me and my partner and another couple from the UK. And we were in the van together for 11 days. And we slept every night in the gares. We literally, there was nothing. And there was no digital anything. There was no GPS. There was no phones or nothing. And the guy would drive all day. And then around 4 or 5 o'clock, we would end up somewhere. And there was nothing. The sand shifted. He was not following any road. I have no idea how he got to somewhere. I don't know if it was luck or on purpose, but it was so beautiful.
And then my other question is, after being on that many cruise ships, would you do another cruise? But I guess just a passenger?
I actually booked a cruise this week. I'm going in October for my birthday with some friends out of San Francisco. And our ports are Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Ensenada. But I'm going with friends that we used to work together. And so when we worked on the ship, at one point, when we all worked together, I was the youth activities manager. Later, I was like Julie McCoy, assistant cruise director, senior assistant. But I was youth manager, and Julie was shop manager. And the man that she's now married to, Marco, was like maybe second officer. So now we're going back. He's the captain, she's the wife, and I'm the friend. So she didn't call me to invite me on the trip. She called me to tell me they were going. And I was like, well, I'm going. She's like, oh, because it's so exotic. You're gonna have Long Beach as a port. She's like, don't you want to go on a cruise where we go somewhere great? I'm like, Marco's the captain, I'm going.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you started on this journey. You dropped out of medical school.
I did drop out of medical school.
Started your Club Med stint.
Yep.
And then went cruising. So I'm sure you weren't a travel writer extraordinaire at that point.
No.
Okay. So how did you finance yourself? How did, again, to be young and be able to go and, like, my son loves to travel. He's been to many, many places. But, yeah, that costs money. My thing is, I love that you want to support, go traveling. But, seriously, how did you finance yourself?
That's a very fair question. So, no, I was not a journalist. In fact, I did not think I was a good writer. I worked for Club Med. At the time, I think that we made $450 a month, but all expenses paid. They gave us a uniform. They paid for my flights. And then when I moved to the cruise ship, I was super excited. I got 100% raise. I made $900. And again, they paid for everything. I describe cruise ships as it's like living in a college dorm, but nobody has any homework. I highly recommend it for young people. Right, I wasn't that young, but I still had a great time. And so we would work for 4 or 6 months and have 4 or 6 weeks off, depending on what your job was and where you worked. And basically all of us traveled on our vacations together. So like you would go I would meet you, and you're from Amsterdam, so I'd come stay at your house. And you come to California, you stay at my house. And nobody had a home. Everybody had a storage unit or like an uncle. So you had no expenses at home. You had almost no expenses on the road. And so that was the ships. Ships paid for itself. And then I was teaching. And so I would teach all year and travel on my vacations.
Oh, okay.
And
so there was a time where you weren't just traveling; you actually got back on land. Yes.
Yeah. So I always came back and traveled. So I worked. I dropped out of school. I went to Club Med, and at some point I got my master's in education. Before I went to Club Med, I had my master's. So I had my master's in education. I could always get hired to teach. So I worked on ships. I would come home and work. After September 11th, I got another credential and I went back to work because I was like, I wouldn't hire me. I'm probably going to go away traveling again. So I got another credential that helped. And so I taught in Culver City. I taught 8th grade physics and chemistry. Yeah, I'm still in touch with my principal. I always say whatever Patty would do next, I would do. Like if she bought a car wash, I'd wash cars. That's how great she was to have as a boss. So I would teach and I would make money. And then I taught at Curtis School, where I actually went. And that was when I first met my partner and we wanted to do this 1-year trip in Asia. And I didn't have the money. So a lot of people, to make ends meet, have another job. So I ran a summer camp that my dad called the Golden Goose Laid an Egg Camp. I had 4 half days and not that many weeks. And it was, I basically all the moms and dads we were in my science classroom all year long, and I was having summer camp. And I was like, people are like, how do we have to come? I'm like, whatever you want. You come every day, you come a half day, bring the older kid, I'll take him as a CIT, whatever. We made lunch, we made pancakes, we had a guest stars. My friend used to bring all these wild animals. It was super fun. I made so much money. My dad's like, why do you work during the year? And I was like, good point. And so that paid for me to go away for the year. And then we came back. I got another job. I worked at Browerman, Wilshire Boulevard Temple School. I was a science teacher there for 3 years. So I worked for 3 years. I saved all my money. We traveled every vacation. We went to Morocco. Someone asked me about Morocco. I went to Morocco for 3 weeks. We came back. I got in trouble because I went away too long. Then I went to Taiwan for 2 weeks on one break. Then we came back. So we had jobs. And we lived very simple. We cooked every meal. People were like, don't you want to go out to dinner? I'm like, nope, I want to go to Taiwan. Save all my pennies. Yeah. I mean, teachers all mostly bring lunch to school. I wasn't spending money during the school day. And so I was teaching. And then when I got divorced and I was back in LA, I wasn't sure what to do. And I started teaching. I was working for Nickelodeon. Well, I had the credential to work on set. And I applied for a job. And on the very same day, I got a job freelancing, but I was the USA Today 10 Best Los Angeles. I got offered to be the USA Today 10 Best Los Angeles correspondent. That same day, I got offered to be a teacher on a series, which was called Bella and the Bulldogs at Nickelodeon. And so I called one of my friends. I'm like, what do I do? And he's like, take both. I'm like, take both? And he's like, well, you don't know what you want to do you? And I was like, no. So it was a little messy, honestly, to have both. But I'm still in touch with Breck Bassinger. She was the star of Bella and the Bulldogs. She's actually in New York right now. Her mom somehow, for the first time ever, tried a bagel yesterday. And I don't know how she never, the things you find out on Instagram stories. They're not. Instagram stories. So, so I worked for Nickelodeon. I made great money. And then I was, USA Today honestly wasn't great money, but it was great experience. And because I was writing for USA Today 10 Best, I got invited to everything.
That's when I would invite you.
Every restaurant opening, every press trip, everyone's like, what can you do for me? And I was like, wow, is it really this impressive? Like, yes.
Wow.
So that gave me the two sides. I had a job that made money and a job that gave access. And so I was doing the USA Today and Nickelodeon, and then I got myself invited There was a series called, it was Richard Bang's show. It was called something like Quest for Adventure. And I said they were going to film a web series for Orbits in Puerto Rico. And I said, well, what would happen if I just happened to be in Puerto Rico when you were there? And he said, well, I guess I would just happen to film you. And I was like, okay, I'll buy my own ticket. They didn't pay me. I bought my own ticket. They gave me everything else. And we filmed together. And we did this Orbit series. And then they were going to do the next series in Bermuda. And the Bermuda team had seen the Puerto Rico, and they asked for me to be the host. And so I went to Bermuda with them. And at the time I was working for Nickelodeon. And they said they wanted me to come. And I said, well, I'm making really good money and you want me to not work, you have to buy me out of my contract for the week. So they did. And so that started me on, you have to pay me. And so that I worked with them in Bermuda, and I started doing stuff for KTLA and figuring it out. And in that process of travel journalism, my best month would have been March 2020. I was just about to sign all the contracts. And then on March 13th, they all went away. And then so you know exactly. And so basically I had started the idea for the book in 2018, 2019. In 2018, I finished all the 50 things. 2019, I met with the agents that said, the 50 things is not a book. You have to write about your divorce. And then I was like, can I, should I, would I? And then I started working with Anne in the end of 2019. And then 2020, it was kind of home, bored, and reading every single one of my emails. So UCLA sent me an email about mental health. And I don't know if you're familiar, UCLA has this project called the Senior Scholars. So most universities around the United States have a program. If you're 65 or older, you can take classes with the students. But UCLA and Temple are the two universities I've found in the United States that start their program at 50. So I was like, well, I'm home and I'm kind of bored. So you can only take 3 classes. I was like, I'll take 3. And at the time, they're 10 weeks, like a regular UCLA, because you're in a regular class with undergraduates for 10 weeks. You have to write papers and everything? No, you're auditing. Oh, okay. I can't think of anything. No, you're auditing. It's $150 a class. So you don't have to do You can do as much as you want. The professors were always like, would you like to be in the group for the group project? And I was like, nope, I would not. Thank you. I'm like, you're so kind. No. I'm like, I'm working on a memoir. It's making me crazy. I don't need to be in a group project with a bunch of 20-year-olds. But thanks. But some of the classes I took producing, I took screenwriting. The best class I took was geography of Los Angeles. And we learned all about different things in Los Angeles, like that case with the beach and who owns the beach and the family.
Yeah. Bird's Beach?
Yes.
Birds,
Yeah. I learned all about that. So when it was in the news, I'm like, I know what that is. And then I took another class in the geography department about California, which was so interesting about the Spanish and Mexico. And I loved that class. I took a relationships class. I didn't love that class. I took
that one didn't take.
No, it was hard not to, it was hard to be kind. I needed places, but I took a really great meditation class, and the professor had been traveling around the world. He'd been in Tibet, and he'd been a Rhodes Scholar. And, up until I took that class, I always thought I was a shitty meditator. And I loved his class. He was like, there's walking meditation. I was like, well, if there's walking meditation, does swimming count? Because I really love swimming. He's like, yes, swimming is your meditation. And I was like, that counts double? Is exercise and meditation? He's like, yes, it is. He said, I don't think that if all you do is sit on a mountaintop alone and never interact with another individual and you're like, oh, I'm so calm. He said, I don't really think that counts. He said, can you maintain calmness in relationship? When someone else is coming at you, can you remember how to relax and be centered? I was like, well, that seems way more valuable to me. And I just never really I'm not that great a sitter. So we used to in class, he's like, everybody walk around, and then there's some stuff you were supposed to do. Maybe the blindfolded was sitting, but there was stuff about different sensory. But they have a whole project at UCLA. I think it's called Mark. I couldn't tell you exactly what it stands for, but one of the women that runs the program, she's a former nun. Diana is her first name. Her voice is amazing. They gave us, when we were in the class, they gave you access to all these things for free, which is so nice for the students. I was like, I'll pay you guys. But there's so many things that we have access to. But I thought but that's that you asked me how I paid for stuff. So that was basically what happened.
No, because it sounded originally like, wow, you're just all over the place, but you were grounded. You were working, but your goal was, I'm doing, and that's really a lot of young people today. Like, yeah, like, yeah, it's really I'm going to work now, and my ultimate goal, and there's a lot of young people who do that. They work for a year. They're like, okay, we're saving our money. We're quitting. And then they go traveling for a year. And it's really...
Well, and when I was traveling, the first 11 months I was sending back newsletters because my students were sad when I left. Mm-hmm. And so the newsletters is what started the website. So when we went traveling the second long year, I was doing remote work, which is very popular now. Everybody talks about being a digital nomad. And
it wasn't 20 years ago, and it wasn't 10.
It was new at the time, but
no, I mean, what you're talking about is very up to date with the philosophy of today. Like any of us, I don't think, I mean, I can speak for myself, and I didn't come from parents who were like, oh yeah, go work and then save your money and then go trap the house. No, what? I mean, your thinking was very ahead of the time, and really forthcoming with, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do, this is my passion. And it sounds like you're a passionate teacher and the kids love you and everything, but ultimately your higher passion and your greater purpose really seems to be traveling the world and meeting people and experiencing that, which is, I think, fantastic for somebody who can really, put a boundary up and go, hey, this is my plan, this is what I need, but ultimately this is really what I want to be doing. So, I mean, I applaud you.
Thank you.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely driven by scuba diving, and traveling, but I feel very fortunate. I've got to tell great stories. I skied with a Paralympic development athlete who has spina bifida, and so she hopefully is competing the next Olympics. But when I met her, she was 14. So we would ride the chairlift up together, and I would interview her, and then she'd wait for me at the bottom.
Oh yeah.
And when I would get there, she'd be like, pretend like she was napping. She's like, oh, you're so slow. Sorry. Doing my best. I'm not a protege athlete, but she worked hard to be good. But it's a real privilege that people are willing to share their stories, and it's interesting now because it's always evolving. Right now, I have the podcast, and what happened with the podcast was I was never very interested in podcasting because most people talk about podcasting. They spend a lot of time editing the sound, and they have to have perfect sound. And I'm not interested in that. And so then I saw there was an ad on Spotify that this Anchor, which Spotify now owns, but at the time was separate, Anchor said they were starting video podcasting on Spotify. So I called a friend, and I'm like, I'm a little bit confused. What's the difference between a movie on YouTube and a video podcast? He's like, absolutely nothing. I'm like, I'm in. So, and it's a funny time that everything is, well, it used to be, I used to go on press trips. I was on a press trip once with this woman from Afar magazine. It's a great travel magazine. And she was a photographer. She took photos. And there was another guy, Mark Elwood, who does a lot of stuff on Good Morning America. He was a writer. And I was writing and doing social media and doing videos and trying to figure out where my place was. And I felt like they got to finish their work. And I was always trying to catch up. I was doing everything, but it's many years later, it's kind of worked out. But
you travel, how do you find your experiences? Because when we start to look at where we're going, and when I travel, I like to spend a lot of time in a few places versus just seeing the highlights of each place. I could spend hours in a food store somewhere.
That's fun.
So how do you find your experiences? I don't just want to go on that American experience.
I agree. You want to have feel the place. So I think one of the best ways is like you're talking about picking less places and having more time. And one of the things that I do is I reach out to my network and I say, who else has been there or who's from there? And I do get the advantage of working with the PR team. And sometimes they're not directing me necessarily to the best things, but the things that's like maybe in the tourism board. So as an example, for AAA, she mentioned I wrote for AAA Explorer in New Mexico. And the PR team, I wrote to the PR team of Visit New Mexico and asked them, what can I write about? What's new? What's different? And the stuff they sent me, I was like, no, I have no editor that's going to take that. And so I called a friend of mine who now lives in Santa Barbara, who used to live in the area. And I was like, can you help me out? I need something better. And she said, oh, my friend's brother's cousin is a 5th generation silversmith. So that was one of my articles. So sometimes you just have to really work a network a little bit. But it's and sometimes it's just luck. Like you're somewhere and you meet someone who, or like even the Hadassah network, that there's, probably local things. How do you find the right person? But it is sometimes a struggle to find the best things. And sometimes you just have to go and sit in a coffee shop. And I was once, the very first day I was ever in Indonesia, I was in Bali, and a friend of a friend messaged me and said, it's Shabbat. What are you doing? I was like, I'm in Bali. I think I'm doing nothing. And he said, oh, go to my friend's house. So I went to the house, and I'm not joking, there's probably 20 people at the table, everybody's speaking a different language, and the guy sitting across from me said, what's your favorite thing about Bali? And I said, I've only been here about 4 hours. I'm not sure it's so great here. It's like, you don't love it here? And he literally, like one of those movie stories, got out a napkin and drew the island, and he started putting like every single place. And literally everything I did that trip was on the napkin. He was like, you're going to go Tonalot, the picture that you guys were talking about that's in the Ticket to Ride movie. I went there because of him. And I went to the plantation, and my friend wanted to go somewhere else. I'm like, it's not on the napkin. We got to go to Ubud. So, but local knowledge can really make a difference. But it can be a challenge.
And you're right, because the tourism people, they have their certain things that they want you.
Those tourism people.
So they they know, but are they going to tell you?
When you go on like Go LA or I forget what
Discover
the
LA.
is, and I thought it was a great website, and then I'm like, you pay to be on there?
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, I thought.
Well, that doesn't inherently make it bad, but we've always had marketing and answers.
Very unique, pure, experience. Again, it's like when you go to a place, and I feel like, a lot of us have traveled and gone places and stuff, and so it's interesting because I feel like we just came back from our summer travels,
right?
But it's like I'm an American and I can appreciate America, great, but I feel like when we go to other countries, people are so excited to see us because we're not from there, and I feel like they go the extra mile to really show us and tell us, and they walk with us, and they'll get you on a bus, and they'll go with you on a train, and they'll show you all these unique places that I feel like Americans are totally not like that. And maybe in small towns, like, oh, go to this restaurant, go to that, but we're not that way. We're not hospitable in that manner. But in all these countries, people really, like, you are family, and there's a real feeling of camaraderie and family and intimacy.
If you're open to it.
And they
Right, you have to be open to
and
it.
they appreciate you're there.
Completely.
It may not happen right away. When you were saying that, made me think. I traveled in China, just me and my partner, and the Lonely Planet, that has things written in the Canton, in language, in the characters. And we were literally, when I say we're in the middle of nowhere, China is a big country. We were in the middle of nowhere, and I literally walked up to the bus station, and I pointed at the thing, and it was all cash. And I literally was like, I want this and this, and like they took money out of my hand,
Right.
and nothing. And then I'm standing there, and then someone literally like took me by the hand and put me on the bus. And I was thinking, now I'm on the bus. How do I know when to get off? But they literally,
know.
they
do it
they
for you.
stopped somewhere and they were
Right.
like, I'm sure the guy said in his language, tell the dumb white people to get off. So we went to eat. We were staying in a place called the 1,000-Year-Old Hotel. We went to eat noodles, and I'm taking pictures of the man making noodles by hand. He brings them to me. I'm eating the noodles. He's taking pictures of me eating the noodles.
Yeah.
And then he afterwards, the man showed me on his phone, I guess was the only other white person that ever eaten with chopsticks in his restaurant. And he was showing it to me. I don't think he was asking me if I knew them because I didn't. But it was like, some of it's about where you go. If there's busloads of people coming, the locals are not so excited to be like, let me show you something special.
Right, it's like cruise ship
like,
ports. Come on.
We wanted to go on a bike ride in Hawaii, and we ended up biking with a guy who actually won championships.
So that's a good guy.
Right, and we met his people. So I contacted him when I thought we were going to go to Italy, and he gave me the name of somebody who actually rode in the Tour de France. We never
That's
made
a good
it, but
person.
it's like, to like keep going that way. But I think that was just luck that we found the person. I wish
It's not.
it was
No.
better. I could feel.
No, you're doing good.
I mean, because like I want to go to Japan, and so somebody I volunteer with, her son lives there, and so I started asking questions.
Right. Yeah.
My friend's daughter
That's
just
the way.
left last week from Morocco for the Peace Corps. That's why we're going to Morocco.
Oh, how
because we're,
exciting.
going to, we didn't go when she was in Ghana, but I want to make sure.
You'll go when you
that
go.
we
But I have
don't
some
miss
ideas for you
something
from
like
Morocco.
that. Okay.
But yeah,
I don't just want to be in the regular places.
it doesn't sound like you are in the regular places. You're doing good.
But it's hard.
Oh,
I want tips.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
It's hard to.
Yes. If you want easy, then you have to go to the 7 places that are on the thrill list, 7 best places to go in Paris.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We're not, I don't think we're doing it.
We didn't.
We didn't do the
Race up time.
We did.
I made bingo cards.
Okay.
This is my friend Michelle.
Michelle.
It was I was swimming and it came to me, what if I made bingo? So I made bingo. I don't know. But yeah, you're doing it the right way. Just feel good about your questions and who's finding you, and it is kind of hard.
It's just asking everybody.
It's just
anybody.
not everybody. You're finding the people,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So that you ask the guy you met in Hawaii that bikes for the France guy. You ask the friend in Japan's cousins, sisters. That's the only way.
But it's exhausting too. It's just a lot of
Instagram.
planning.
Start
I
putting
understand.
words in Instagram. You start getting the best stuff.
Yeah, but Instagram, I find. We were driving through Topanga Canyon when we first moved here, and it's these pictures of this great little cafe, and we stopped there, and I'm like, well, here we are. It wasn't so great, so
So
it's
you
hard
figure out
to
what's
figure
important
out
to
what-
you, and you go that way.
Yeah.
Like you can even
but it's hard.
contact the Chabad or the temple. Yeah, that's hard.
I think
They're just trying to take
I
the
think
reins
that-
for it.
I think it's about following something. Like if you like biking and you watch the Tour de France and then following something. For me, I try to visit synagogues. I do ceramics, so I'll look for something with art. So I was just in in Canada. I went on a walking safari with the polar bears, which was amazing.
Oh, her
And-
videos are amazing.
Thank you. But I was in Winnipeg before you fly. I flew direct LA Winnipeg, and then you fly Winnipeg Churchill, and then you fly charter Churchill to the lodge. But when I love Winnipeg. I've been there before. And I was talking to the nice PR team, and I said, is there something it can do that's art? And the woman thought about it, and she came back to me. She said, would you consider doing a soapstone carving workshop with a indigenous tribe member? And I was like, I'm happy to do it. I think I'll probably suck, but I'm happy to do it. And so it turns out soapstone is so soft that they use files, like more than a nail file, but the same files you would use for wood carving. And I only filed in my hand one time, but the woman that was there with him was like, do you need a Band-Aid? I'm like, it's probably not much yet. And but my polar bear does look like a polar bear that I made because I asked for help. So a lot of people wouldn't let the artist touch their work. But I've been doing ceramics a long time, and I remember being new at ceramics, and I need a lot of help. So I'm like, my first day ever being a soapstone carver. You can help me. And he was so funny. You have to pick a piece of rock, and I picked one, and he was like, no, this isn't your piece. This is your piece. And anyway, but so I look for that. And so it sounds like you look for biking.
I mean, just one of the things.
But whatever the thing is.
You know, all the different things. Just trying to be.
Well, some people.
I want to experience a real, being.
But the other thing you could do is, like, here we are in Venice Beach at an amazing bookstore, right? We're at Small World Books. So you could, if you love books and authors, you could come to the bookstore and be like, are there any events happening? Can I meet a local author? Do you have I'm still in part of the tour, get a book. Right? Like, I go to the library a lot of times, and I'll get Fedor's, Frommer's, Lonely Planet. I like the Discovery guides because the pictures are pretty and in color, and I'm swayed by that. And I'll look at what do they have. And I always look, when people say to me, what should I do in so-and-so place? I always send them Lonely Planet. I have a number of friends that are now Lonely Planet writers, and I've traveled with them. So my friend right now, who's from Wales, she's definitely been to the Isle of Man, is writing the Wales book. So I know they work very hard. Another friend of mine, when you go to Japan again, so my friend is updating the Japan section for Patricia Schultz for the book 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. So if you said to me, where should I go in Japan? I would say, I have no idea, but you could call Andy. So that's my best opportunity, is to give you someone smarter than me. People call me all the time about Thailand, and I say, there's so many places to go. I haven't been in a long time, but then I was talking to someone, I'm like, well, I love this place and this place, and that hasn't changed. Like, I don't know that my favorite restaurant's still there, but I know that Chiang Mai night market's amazing. So you got to start somewhere. Oh, is it time to stop talking?
So I actually went next door. So he's bringing us, he goes, what do you have there? Cake? I go, yeah, do you want some too? And I go, then get us like 8 forks. So anyways,
Thank you.
Yes.
It's your birthday.
Woohoo! Okay, should we should we give up? We can do the prizes with food?
You holding your book or
okay.
Can I get that?
Yes, we can have lots of pictures. Oh yeah.
I lived in Vegas for years. I want to play bingo.
Tell me your name again.
Hope.
Hope. Oh, that's right. Hope. I don't have a really good idea about bingo. What should I do? Should everyone say I have the list of words. I didn't have a great plan yet about this game. I have the whole list of words. I could just call some words.
Let's think about this. This is a really good idea.
Did you do the sheets in different ways?
Each card is, oh my God, that's amazing.
So I just had them right. Liz Bravish. Anyway,
today's the book's birthday.
so it's a paradise cake. So it's going to be yummy once he brings us our supplies.
Okay, hold on. We got to take a picture of the cake. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Hold on. But I want you to be in it.
I'm going to be in it. Don't worry.
I'm going to teach you something.
Wait, where's the button? There we go.
Hold on. I'm going to teach you one new thing. Hold on. I'm going to turn this off. Let them eat cake.